All right, good evening, everyone. Like I said before, my name is Eric, and tonight is not like a real deep dive into the solution focus approach, because we would need way more than an hour together. But I am gonna take you through the 5 solution focus steps that I've created over the many years that I've worked with families, how you can take someone from where they are now to where they would like to be. So the solution focus approach is a highly effective method to coach someone from where they are now to where they would like to be. And it doesn't matter if you work with children, or if you work with young teenagers, or young adults, or with families, or with groups. The principles of the solution focus approach and the steps can be used as a whole, but also what you will see, the 5 steps that I'm going to introduce, will also be able to you'll be able to use that individually. So the solution focused approach really is all about knowing which powerful solution focused questions that you need to ask. What you will find, I mean, you're all from different places. Some people are at school, some people work as social workers, family support practitioners. Solution focus is about asking questions. Asking the right questions will open up doors, but I'm going to explain it way deeper than that. So the solution focus approach helps the person you are working with, and this is an important one, to take ownership of their journey, as well as increase their willingness to engage with you. I mean, I don't know about you, but since 2003, that's when I was introduced to the solution focus approach. I work with over 1,000 families using the solution focus approach, and there was always one thing that was vitally important for me, and that if I could get the family or whoever I was working with to the place of them taking ownership of the process, real ownership, not just saying that the words that they think you want to hear because they either want to please you or get rid of you, but if they come to the place to take real ownership, then that makes the journey so much easier. And the same thing is that if we could increase their willingness to engage with you, that again would make it so much easier. So the questions within the solution focus approach will offer that. So the solution focus approach also, this is really interesting, it provides a clear structure that you can follow. Over the last 11 years, I've trained over 4,500 professionals in the solution focus approach, face to face, when we were still allowed to do that. But the really interesting thing there was, at the beginning of each training, I always ask people, what sort of approach do you use when you really try to help families to shift their situation, or what is it that you do? And the answer that I got back, at least of 80% of the people, is that they said that, Eric, I just feel that I'm just winging it. I am just winging it. And after the 2 days training, all these people said, man, now I really feel that I have a structure, and that structure will help me to go from the just winging with it feeling to feeling confident in knowing how I could help the families to move from where they are now to where they would like to be. So what we're going to just touch on is, I'm going to tell you a tiny bit more about me so that you understand who is sitting in front of you. I'm going to talk to you about some solution focused principles. Even those principles on its own, if you would implement those, it would seriously change the way you work with families. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 C's, because the 3 C's actually help me to know if I've done a good session with someone. So I'm going to share those 3 C's with you, and the 3 C's actually are all within the whole solution focus approach. So, and I'm going to talk to you about the 5 steps within the solution focus approach. So a little bit about me. I already told you is that I'm living in the UK, but for the last 21 years, but I can't get rid of this accent. I qualified to be a social worker in the Netherlands in 1998. I moved to England in 1999 and started working with, first of all, in a boarding school. But in 2003, I ended up in a specific family team, a team that was like a specialist team in the social services in West Sussex. And that's where I first got introduced to solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT, that is the short of that. So solution-focused brief therapy. Between 2003 and the end of 2009, I worked in this team, the family resource team. So I worked in this team till the end of 2009, and after that, from 2009, I had to leave my team at the end because my oldest son, who's now 19 years old, but at that time he was 8. In 2009, he was 8 years old. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and we found a specific program that we wanted to do at home, and I really wanted to be there for him. So I left the team and I started my own company called Solution Focused, and over the 11 years trained over 4,500 professionals through the whole of the UK, worked with many local authorities, and really learned how powerful the solution focused approach is. So let's have a little look. So let's look at the solution focused principles. Each of those principles on its own can really make a change in how you think and how you work with the people that you work with. So initially, one of the first principles that they teach you is that we see, and when I talk about family, you can basically think about the person that you are working with, but I'm just going to talk about a family. So we see the family as the expert of their own situation. This doesn't mean that we agree with them, but it is a very respectful way of approaching someone. What I've learned over the many years that I've now worked with families, that often their experience of social workers or other professionals sometimes can be like that of a bulldozer, that they come in and they straight away focus on the problem. But we used to have a leaflet in my team that clearly said, you know, we're not coming in to start telling you what to do. We see you as the expert of your family. And I think it's just a real polite way, because they do know their family best. We help families, this is also interesting, we help families to focus on what they do want. And this is really important, not what they no longer want. If I would give you a simple example, if I would ask a family what it is that they want to achieve from working with me, and they say, I want my children to stop fighting, then they're actually telling me what it is that they no longer want. They don't want their children to fight anymore. So it is my role as a solution-focused practitioner to really help them to understand, to get clarity about what it is that they do want. Because once people know what it is that they do want, it is a lot easier to get where you want to be or where you want to go. So yeah, so we help families to focus on what it is that they do want. And I'm really curious, from today onwards, I really want you to take this with you, this little thing, that when someone is going to tell you, sometimes even on referral forms, we see it written down what it is that they no longer want to see from the family, rather what it is that they do want to see. So try to take that with you and really think about it, because you will start to see it now more and more, that you need to have on your piece of paper or in your mind what you're going to do. It is what they do want. Another one of the solution focused principles is, if something works, do more of it. Sounds very straightforward and simple, but so if it doesn't work, stop doing it and throw it in the bin and leave it there. And you have to think of a new strategy. You know, so many times, especially in the beginning when I was working with families, week after week after week, the family did the same thing with their children or with their situation, but every time they were expecting a different outcome. And well, you know, the word that for people that expect a different outcome by doing the same thing over and over again, that is insanity. And so we see that. So the whole concept of this is that we educate. I mean, that is another part of the solution focused approach, that we educate people about their own thinking, about themselves, because if we can help them to get an increased awareness of who they are, of themselves, then it will be way more easier for them to start making better decisions. So we need to make them aware is that, you know, if something doesn't work, stop doing it. And if it works, let's do more of it. We don't have to invent the wheel again. So if it doesn't work, we chuck it in the bin and we leave it there. And then we think of a new strategy. And that's not just for the parents, it's also for workers. I have met so many workers who were overwhelmed because they had to go to the same family again and do the same thing again. You know, it is also very important for you to know you know, what it is that you want to do with the family. But also, if something doesn't work, then you have to just stop doing it and think of a new strategy. Also, just makes me think, see if I can go back. We help the family to focus on what it is that they do want. I think this is also a very important part about your bit of work, that you have clarity about what it is that you want to do with the family, but more about that a little bit later. So when using the solution focus approach, we will work with small achievable steps. And they are not just small achievable steps. They are seriously, ridiculously small achievable steps. But I'm going to talk about it as one of the 5 steps. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment. But I love the fact that we work with small achievable steps. But why I love it, you have to hang on and find out in a moment. This is my favorite. This changed everything that I did. The Eric before solution focused actually would give someone within the first 10 minutes of seeing them, I would start offering them all the ideas that I had in my toolbox and in my thinking. You know, I did this with this family and it worked. Maybe you should try it. And I did it. I came from a good place. I wanted them to shift and to help them. But it wasn't helpful, because when you start telling someone what to do, they, like little children, when you tell a little child what to do, they will rebel. And adults, we're just a little bit older, but often I see families, when I would advise them what to do, they still won't do it. They don't take the ownership, you know. And so we have to move away from offering our own ideas and suggestions. But instead, we need to become an expert in knowing which questions to ask to get the person to come up with a solution that works for them. Because that is where the magic happens. If you really think about it for a moment, when someone comes up with a solution that works for them, then they own it. And when they own it, they are way more likely to follow through with it. Just simple question, simple things. How many of you, and I've muted you so you can't answer me, but how many of you, and in your own thinking, just answer that, have got children, and in the morning before they have to go to school, you say, go and get dressed now. Or in the evening, go and get changed. You need to get ready. And 10 minutes later, they still haven't done it. And you might end up in a little shouting match or an argument or something like that. I mean, I used to do that, you know, particularly in the morning when I asked him to go and get dressed now and he wouldn't do it. But a while ago, I started to implement, you know, this process. And what I do now is in the morning at about sort of 8 o'clock, I ask my youngest the question. I say, you know, when do you think will be a good time for you to get dressed this morning? And he looks at the clock and he says, on the 4 or on the 5. And as long as I sort of think that is within reason, I say, okay. And so far, ever since I've started to do that, he's taken ownership. And as soon as he came up with the idea, with the solution, he feels I own it, and he's doing it every day. And it's just one simple little thing, is that move away from offering your own ideas. And if you are sitting listening to me now and recognize yourself in this, just take a little note of that, because at the end, I would love to hear from you if this was the moment whereby you recognize that this might be you. And if so, then I hope that you will take away from this moment here that every time when you want to tell someone what to do, the whole concept is, it's not wrong, the ideas that you have in your head, but you need to learn to know which questions to ask to get your idea transferred to their thinking, to their head, so that they come up with it, and when they own it, they're way more likely to follow through with it. That's what I've written down here. If they feel they've come up with it, with the solution, they will own it, and they are way more likely to follow through with the process. So how do I know that I have done a good session? So this is something that I found really interesting in my work. You know, when I started in 2003 and I was introduced, our managers decided to really fully invest in the solution focused training. So we had at least 8 days a year where the guys from Brief in London, that's Europe's largest provider of solution focused training, they came to us and they worked with us as a team. And I became so fascinated to see the changes that it would make. You know, we used to work for 9 months, 10 months, 12 months with families, but once the solution focus approach was introduced, I started to see that we sometimes work with families for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and it was just amazing to see that change. And particularly the more pure we became in the solution focus approach, the better the better results we started to see. But so how do I know? Because I really wanted to know, how can I know I've done a good session? And having worked with so many families, I discovered for me what is a good session. So I'm going to introduce you to the 3 C's. You might wonder there, what are the 3 C's? Because there are so many C's, you know, communication, confidence, commitment, consistency, so many C's. But the C's that will tell me if I've done a good session, and I'm talking about doing like not a 10-minute visit. I'm talking a proper session whereby you're really going to help the person or the family to start on their journey, to help them to move from where they are now to where they would like to be, or where you would like them to be. So the first C is connection. At the end of a session, I need to look back and I need to ask, did I develop a deep level of connection with this person? Because if I don't do that, I will miss out a huge opportunity for the process to go quicker. So if I miss out on connection, I can guarantee that next week I will have to start again. But you know, the 3 C's are all within the 5 steps of the solution focus approach. So I will touch on them a little bit more a little bit later. So once at the end of the session, once I can look back and I can say, yeah, tick, I've created that really deep level of connection with the family. Then I need to check this, the second C, which is clarity. I need to help the family with give them real clarity about what it is that they want to achieve from working with me. If people do not have clarity, and that is for you as well, if you might have find yourself doing some work, realizing that you do yourself have no clarity about what it is, what specific piece of work it actually is that you need to do. And that can create overwhelm, and you end up visiting people or doing the piece of work week after week, but without real clarity. You know, real clarity is so vital that, you know, the more you know about where you want to travel to, the easier it is to get. I mean, I remember once training a group of 55 people in pool, and if I would have those 55 people at the end of the day, I would shout at them, yay, let's meet at the cinema at 7 o'clock tonight for a drink. The chance that they would meet up at the same cinema, if that's the only information they've got, it would be most unlikely that they would be there. If I would say to them, guys, let's meet up in the high street, the cinema in the high street next to the McDonald's opposite the NatWest, and there's a Starbucks inside. With that detailed information, it will be easier to travel. So what I'm trying to say is the more clarity you can help the family, the person to gain of what it is that they want, the journey getting there will become a lot easier. If I haven't got that clarity, I can't take it, and I know that I will not get the most out of the session that I could get. And the last one is commitment. Interestingly enough, in the very beginning, when I ended the session with the family, I would normally end on step 4. And step 4 is that you come up with a small achievable step with an action point, and then you then I would say goodbye to them. But what I realize is that if I don't get the family to get to the highest level of commitment, then again, I'm missing a point. So how I'm going to do those 3 C's, I will talk to you when I take you through the 5 steps of the solution focus approach. But again, at the end of the session, I ask myself, I used to have a little sort of business card size label saying the 3 C's, so I could remind myself of, did I develop a deep connection with them? Did I help them get that clarity of what it is that they want? And did I get them to the highest level of commitment to actually throw themselves in this process? If I could say tick, 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 then I knew I had done a good session. So that's sort of how I was measuring my sessions. And like I said, the 3 C's are all within the solution-focused approach. So the 5 steps within the solution-focused approach. Let me, and this is for you to know, is that the 5 steps fit within a 45 to 60 minute session. However, sometimes you might find I stuck with step 1 for the whole session because it was really necessary, or there is no written rule. But when we became a pure team and we only did solution focus, we just had like 60-minute sessions with families, and we really managed to get it within the 60 minutes to do all the 5 steps. And the beautiful thing is, about your first session, you will get so much information about this family and the situation that you can take all that information back to your office when you write down, well, when you have to write a report about them or something like that. But so let's look at the 5 needs. The 5 steps within the solution focus approach. So first step is problem-free talking. And I'm going to go deeper in a moment. We have best hopes, then we have the skill, the small achievable step, and we're finishing off with the commitment scale. And you can do this in many different ways. We used to sometimes work from a children's center, and then we had a room. Sometimes we had a flip chart up in the room, because we started to notice that some families really like to see what they're saying. It makes them, first of all, feel listened to. Also, when they actually answer your question and you write it down, it actually gives them some time to reflect on what they said. And if I say anything else or what else, then you will be surprised that there is always something more for them to tell you. So don't just accept the first answer that someone gives you. That's like a service level answer, but go deeper with it. But you can also sit opposite someone in the lounge and pretend everything. If you make a skill, you can just do it in the air. There's so many different ways. I used to take flip chart paper and put it on someone's coffee table. And when I had to draw a scale, I would ask the children to draw in the blocks on the scale. There are so many different ways you can use this. With. So let's look at the first step: problem-free talking. So if you work in a school, I know that sometimes you might have only a few minutes, but it is so powerful to start that connection, to build that connection. And the way we do that, because with a good connection, you will see that your work goes faster and quicker, and you will catch up on time. But also you will get them. I mean, just think about for a moment, when you work with someone, what state are they often in? People might be anxious, nervous, angry, confused. That is not a good state to start working with you and to start going on that journey to see change. So therefore, with problem-free talking, what we do is we get them to a state where they are more relaxed and more chilled and more connected. So we talk about anything but the problem. And what we try to do, we try to tap into something that they are passionate about. And with this step, I will give you an example of one of my first families that I properly used a solution-focused approach on. And this is now 2010 we're talking about. No, 2003 we're talking. So that's a long time ago. However, I still remember it because, our team was the last team that would go in. All the other services have been involved. And then it was, well, our opportunity to save the local authority a lot of money to prevent children from going into care or into foster care, So this family, there was a 65-year-old granny who was looking after her 15-year-old grandson. And what happened there is that he was kicked out by his parents, but granny couldn't cope anymore. And all the services have been involved. And we were asked, can you go and please work with this family? My first case that I was properly doing solution focus, or one of my first cases. And I remember walking into her home, and it was just her sitting in her rocking chair. And she was like rocking. And I kind of panicked, and I thought, man, it's like she's in trance. What can I do? What can I do? So I know problem-free talking. I need to find a way to connect to this lady. So I looked around the house, and for some crazy reason, everywhere I looked, I saw porcelain dolls. And I must have watched Little Britain the night before, because I had a weird voice when I shouted out. I said, porcelain dolls, what's that all about? You know what happened? It was so interesting. As soon as I mentioned the word porcelain dolls, I saw a twinkle in her eye, and that is the moment what I was looking out for. I was looking out for something that could break her pattern of rocking. So she stopped rocking, and I knew that I'm going to sit on the edge of my chair, and for 5 to 8, maybe 10 minutes, I asked her about porcelain dolls. You know, and I discovered that she travels Europe and goes to exhibitions. She buys them, she sells them, she makes clothing, she puts makeup, she takes pictures, she meets Facebook groups, and she meets in local communities. This lady was an absolutely porcelain dolls expert. And after 10 minutes, I felt like an expert, but it wasn't about the porcelain dolls. I mean, it is important that when you get seriously engaged with someone, that you are serious about it, and not just that you do it for the sake of doing it, but that you properly get serious about this. So at some point she stopped rocking, but you know what actually happened? Her and I were clicking to such a level that she forgot why I was there. And that made us, she liked me, you know, because I like something that she liked, but I was passionate about it too. So we were clicking, and 6 weeks later, this family was back at a place where things were manageable again. And that's why the problem-free talking part is such an important part. If I don't get the connection with the people, then I can start all over again next week. But hey, what do we do when they suddenly do want to talk about the problem, and you sit there in your problem-free talking time trying to connect, and suddenly they throw in this problem? And what we actually do there, and I remember this guy once who had 2 young children, about 8 and a 7-year-old, something like that. He was a single dad, and he had students as his neighbors, and every night at around 8 o'clock, they would put on the telly or the music on really loud. And every time when I came, this guy was livid. He was so angry. And one day he said to me, you know, and I was doing my problem-free talking. That actually was in the first session with him. He was so angry. He said, I just felt like going over there and punch the lights out. And I always try to listen for that little sentence, that little bit where I can jump in on. And I said, whoa, let's say his name is Sean. I said, Sean, you said you felt like going over there and punching the lights out, but you didn't. Why is it? Oh, because I don't want my kids to see that, he said. I said, why not? Well, man, come on, my kids, I love my kids. I want them. And that's where I got them. And I managed to shift from, you know, but there's one key element that I did do, but I forgot to tell you, is when someone throws a problem at you and you're not there yet, is there's a good way to say to them is that, you know, that must be really hard for you to have these neighbors that make so much noise, but you know, we'll be able to talk about it later. But you know, as I walked in, I saw these 2 muddy mountain bikes. What is that all about? Who is that in the family that does that? So I hope you can see the key thing here is to acknowledge someone. Because if I would go and he says, oh, man, I could have punched the lights out and I'm so angry, and I would say, oh, look, nice little bird. You know, that would have really got him angry. So it is the acknowledgement. When someone feels acknowledged and listened to, they are willing to calm down a little bit more. And then you take him back to the problem-free talking until you got that connection. And I bet you that most of you are already doing elements of this, but it is so important that if you're wondering, why am I not moving on? Ask yourself, have I got that really good connection with the family? The second part is called best hopes. So once we've got that connection with the family, we actually are going to ask a lot of solution-focused questions. Because what we need to do in this part of the process, we need to help the family. By the way, that the problem-free talking, did you realize that that was the first C, connection? So that's what we do. The second C, clarity, is in the best hopes part. Because we need to ask them solution-focused questions to help them to create a detailed picture of what it is that they want to achieve from working with us. You know, we want to know what that would look like when we arrive there. What is going on? So that is really important that you keep asking what else when they tell you something. And it is so vitally important that in this process you help them to gain clarity of what it is that they do want. So when they tell you, I want my children to stop fighting, what is it that you will say? And we use a key word for that. We use the word instead. We say, instead of your children fighting, no, if your children are no longer fighting, that's how you ask it. If your children are no longer fighting, what will they be doing instead? And you will see their brain go a little bit, because solution-focused questions has got one side effect. It sometimes scrambles people's brain because people have just been stuck in the problem thinking. And what we're trying to do is starting them to get to think about the preferred future, what it is that they want. Here we are. What the whole best hopes that the second step, what it also will do, which is vitally important, because I bet that lots of you have worked with families where there is minimum motivation. People that they don't even see that there's a problem, they're just not motivated. And just in case, if there is anyone that doesn't want to work with you, but they are fed up, let's say, with the whole social services coming on board, there's an interesting question that you can ask them. And I used to say to them, you know, if the consequence of you and me working together over the next few weeks, if the consequence of that is that you get rid of it all, would you be interested in that? And I have not heard so far that, how do you call it, that no one has said no to me. So that's a great way to get someone on board. But the solution-focused questions in the best hopes, they will increase their motivation, will be able to turn negative goals around. Like a negative goal is that I want them to stop fighting. So what will they be doing instead? Well, they'll be playing or getting along. So that is what you write down so that you have a clear goal. And your job really is to make that picture as detailed as possible. I mean, like I said, I only have a certain amount of time to go deep into this. So there are, you know, a whole bunch more things that I could share with this, but then I will not have enough time to talk about the other stuff. But I hope that you're getting an idea. After problem-free talking, after the connection, we're going to help them to create that picture of their preferred future, of what it is that they want to achieve from working with you. And we're going to help them to increase their motivation with the solution-focused questions. And also, we're going to explore what has worked in the past, because I love the solution focus. In the beginning, people always say about solution focus, yeah, it's not like counseling. Counseling, you go to the root of the problem and you're trying to turn it around or figure out why it went wrong. But in solution focus, we also look at the past. But we look actually at the past to figure out what worked well, even if it was only for 5 minutes. But anything that has worked in the past, that would be a good thing. To give you an example, I always think of my old head teacher when I was in secondary school. I had to go to his office so many times. Not that he liked me, but I was quite playful and I was still playing. So I was sent to the headmaster office and he always recognized my footsteps. You know, he always focused on the how do you call that, the things that went wrong. But if he would have explored the days that I did come in on time, for example, or the days that I did have a good day, the things that when did it work well and why did it work well? And instead of focusing on the negative and saying, I don't want you to do that anymore, really trying to explore how could we do more of the days that when things were working. So in solution focus, we do explore the past and we draw from the past the things that are working. And let's not invent the wheel again and again. Let's use what has already been working and just increase that. The third step in this process is the scale. And the scale is, I always draw it like from 0 to 10. You can draw it in any way, you can do it horizontal. But the scale has a great function because what it does is it measures the process of the journey. So you have a 0 to 10, and 10 actually stands for that picture of the preferred future that you just help them to create. And we say at 10, you have completely achieved it, and 0 is the worst case scenario. And then we're going to help them to find out, where do you feel that you currently are on your journey? We're going to find out, again, there's another solution focused question there on the scale whereby we can explore their strengths and what has been working well. it's so vitally to know what's been working well, because in step 4, when we are going to explore the small achievable step, sometimes they don't have an idea of a small achievable step, and then we go back to explore what worked in the past. Can we do more of that? So that's really important to hold on to that. And we also want to know on the scale, let's say, you figured out that they're on a 4, but where would they like to be on the scale? And an interesting aspect there is this is how we find out where they would like to be. So you have a scale. I draw it this time horizontal because it's easier. But I always say to the person that I'm working with, I said, knowing that no one is a perfect 10. Knowing that no one is a perfect 10. Where would you like to be? Where things are manageable. That's a key word. 2 key sentences, because often when you ask, where would you like to be? Sometimes they want to please you and they say a 10 because they want to score as high as possible. But let's say that you've discovered that they are at a 4. Now we want to know is, knowing that no one is a perfect 10, where would you like to be? Where things are manageable, but also where you no longer need me. And that's a key question. It's a key question to actually figure out what is that number on the scale where things will be manageable. And what does manageable mean? Manageable means that things will still go wrong from time to time. But you actually, how do you call it? You got them to the level where manageable is that they can rein it back in. So I hope you can see, if you ever do the scale, do not to inform them that no one is a perfect 10, and where is manageable, where it goes wrong from time to time, but you can still rein it back in and control it. And also where you no longer need me. Wouldn't it be nice that at the first session, you can already identify where on the scale they think they need to be to identify that they no longer need you, or to know that you are no longer needed. So it's important. So once you have figured out where they would like to be on that scale, and you also help them just to identify what actually goes on at that number. So if I would walk into your life at a 7, tell me what will it look like? What will I see? What's happening? Then they are at a 4 and they want to be at a 7, let's say, or an 8. And then we really need to help them to start shifting, moving up. And we call that the small achievable step. And if this was a Marks and Spencer's advert, I would say it's not just a small achievable step. It is a seriously, ridiculously small achievable step. Because we want them to taste success. Sometimes people say, Eric, I only have 6 weeks to work with this person. I don't have time for small steps. We need to make big steps. But the beautiful thing about the solution focus approaches is that when you get that first small achievable step right, and that is your responsibility to make sure that it is really small and achievable, when they get it right, it anchors them. They taste success, and it will anchor a good feeling of working with you. Because how many times have people in the past worked with someone, said that they would do something, and that person didn't do the solution focus techniques and didn't ensure that they were at a really high commitment level and didn't help them choose the right small achievable step. They will think, man, you see, I told you, tried it, didn't work. And you've lost them. So therefore, seriously, ridiculously small achievable step. We want them to taste success. And we don't move up to a 7 straight away. I only want them to move up by half a point. I mean, if for whatever reason they move up more, they feel like move up more, I will jump up and I do my little celebration dance. But I just want them to move up by half a point. And so I ask them to really come up with a small achievable step. And I really want it to come from them. But sometimes if they don't know, I can go back and explore what worked in the past and ask if any of these things, if we do more of that, might that help you to move up? I find the small achievable step one of the most difficult ones, because if I do it wrong, I miss an opportunity to help this family to shift, and I can start all over again next week. So I spend quite a bit of time on getting the small achievable step right. But once they have figured out their small achievable step, I take them to the commitment scale, which is the end. And I hope you also can see that all of these things, the problem-free talking, to the best hopes, the scale, and the small achievable step, you can use them individually. You don't have to use them as a system. When you do therapeutic work with families and you want to take someone through a process, it is super effective when you follow the system. But it is, you can do scaling, you know, the best day of school scale, you know, 10 is the best day. What will it look like? Where are you right now? I mean, there's so many things possible. The best day of your life scale, or the best friendships. I mean, there's so many things. It's really exciting stuff, scales. But it's important to help them reach the highest level, because if I don't help them to reach the highest level to follow through with that small achievable step, then I miss the opportunity. So for their sake and for my sake, I'm going to do everything in my power to help them to move up. So again, you got the scale. 10 stands for I am 100% committed, whoop, whoop. And 0 is I seriously can't be bothered. And then I asked them, I said, you know, where do you think you are on the scale? How committed are you? If they give me a 5 or a 4, I know that it is not the right small achievable step. So I have to either go back to the drawing board, or I need to maybe change certain things. And then this is what I do. I find myself to become a detective. I think of any reason why they might not follow through in the coming week with that small achievable step. And with everything that pops up in my head, I will come up with a question that they need to answer to ensure that they won't use that reason to say, oh, I didn't do it. So I will figure out, you know, for example, what day are you going to do something, what time, where, with who, what do you need? Do you need to make sure that you got time available? What is plan B if plan A doesn't work? It might feel a bit too much, but I promise you, in the end, like I said, I used to finish at the small achievable step and say, I'll see you next week. But when I started introducing the commitment scale, the place where people will sign up to the process, where I get them to the highest level of the commitment to wanting to do this and agreeing to do this, it's almost like them signing something, you know, I'm committing to this. I started to get quicker, better results. So much faster. It was so exciting to see, to add this step to the solution focus approach. So the summary of the solution focus approach, we start with the first C, connection, with problem-free talking. Talk about anything but the problem until we've got that real connection. And you can use anything that you see around you. This is a fun thing to actually practice with each other, because it's quite a tricky thing to learn. You know, because often people are very tense, very stressed, and they want to just straight away talk about the problem. But really important, first C, tick. Then we jump to the best hopes, whereby you're going to help them with solution-focused questions to get a real clarity about a detailed picture about their preferred future, of what it is that they want from working with you, what it would look like, and all of that sort of stuff. Exploring the past, their strengths, and also turning around negative goals with the word instead. Then, once we figured out what it is that they want to achieve, we draw that scale. 10 is everything that we discussed in your detailed picture, having achieved it, and 0 is the worst case scenario. Figuring out where people are, where they want to be, learn about their strengths using the solution focused questions. And it truly will help it, you know, because the next week that you see them, you don't have to do the whole thing again. You can go straight back to that small achievable step and figure out, you know, what did they do? How did it go? And, you know, if they, for whatever reason, still not have managed to do it, which if you do the commitment scale is most unlikely, but if they, then instead of saying, why did you not do it? You simply focus on the concept of, you know, tell me, what might you do different next time? And get them to think about that, or ask them if they think that we need to change the small achievable step to get to something that they can commit to more. So after the scale, we figure out the small achievable step, seriously, ridiculously small and achievable, so that, you know, they can start moving up on the scale a half a point. And if they do more, fantastic. But it really is important that they taste success, because that will benefit you as well. You know, for them to, you know, can you imagine that they say to you, man, I didn't move up half a point. I feel I'm 2 points higher. Wow. That is the first time that they will experience such a change and such a positive reaction from me, the worker, because I will celebrate with them. And at the end, get them to commit through all sorts of questions to the highest level possible on the commitment scale. I hope you can see that it is a very clear structure. I'm looking at the time now, and it is 8:22. Let me just see. Oh yeah, that is what I want to tell you. The story of the solution focused bicycle. You might think, what do you mean, Eric? Bicycle. But when I first started working with solution focused, man, did I mess up, because I was so set in my ways that I struggled with this new approach. And I want you to think of a young boy, tiny little boy, who's going on his first bike. We're very mean, we're not putting stabilizers on, and he's pedaling with his little legs. And what happens? Crash. He crashes. And, you know, he cries and he's upset. But what does he do? He gets up on his bike and he goes again. He pedals as hard as he can and he crashes again. And he does that for quite a few days. He's got some bruises here and there. He's really upset. But, you know, it's not that he's going to give up. No. And, you know, and it's also not that one day he just wakes up in the morning and he suddenly says, oh, I'm totally getting this whole cycling thing, gets on his bike and off he goes. No. What happens is that as he is trying to cycle again, this magical thing happens whereby this whole balancing thing, out of nowhere, it suddenly clicks, it makes sense. And that is the solution focused approach. I started on my solution focused bike and I crashed quite a few times. And I got up and I got up until one day it became a natural part of my thinking. It became a natural reaction. And the more I did it, the faster I reacted. My body muscles, almost my thinking muscles, were trained to react. You know, when people play table tennis, if you're playing for the very first time, it is quite awkward and difficult to hit the ball back. But for someone who is really trained for years, however hard that ball, which I would say that challenging question from the family, however hard that ball comes at you, they bang, they straight away know how to hit it back because their body is trained. So when you train your brain in solution-focused questioning and the steps and everything around it, what you will see is you will move from feeling like you're winging it to feeling confident. So the solution-focused approach is amazing. It seriously is, it's been life-changing for me, but there was something missing. You know, when I work with families, it was great to coach them from where they are now to where they would like to be. I missed something because I started to see sometimes families come back after 6 months. So there was something missing. What was it that I wasn't doing? And that is where I discovered that I wasn't helping them to understand why they were doing what they were doing. I wasn't helping them to understand themselves. So I created something called the Behavior and Relationship Toolkit. And there are 5 tools in the Relationship and Behavior Toolkit. And what these tools do, it totally shifts someone's thinking. The first tool, the 6 human needs, truly, I mean, that has been the most life-changing tool that I've ever put together from the things that I've learned. It turns around challenging behavior. It teaches parents how to turn around challenging behavior. It shows parents why their children are behaving in the way. It helps parents to move from the place of they're just doing this to ruin my life to there's logic to it all. And it shows them how they can help the children to turn that challenging behavior around. Full ownership is a crazy easy tool that will help parents to slow down and move from being a reactionary person to a person that can press a pause button and can ask themselves really powerful questions that will change their decision-making process, and it helps them to make better choices in life. The 5 love languages, you might know about that, but we all have a different love language. And when you love your child in a different love languages that they can receive love, things will clash. So every time I could explain that to a parent, it just started to make sense for them. The rules we live by. It's so funny. I think of my mom and dad. They have rules in their house. You know, you wouldn't smoke in the house. You wouldn't swear in the house. You definitely wouldn't leave your clothing lying around in the house. If I would break one of their rules, man. But we need to understand each other's rules to have. The more we understand other people's rules, the more influence we've got. Also, relationship first. Again, it's all about how can we keep that relationship, because when we keep that relationship, we have more and more influence on the other person. And that's what we want. We want to have the well, we need as workers the perfect combination of the solution focused approach and the behavior and relationship toolkit.